we've kind of already seen AI advancing scientific research, so it just makes sense that it's going to start advancing the types of science that communities have to do to make themselves better. That community leaders need to be able to do.
And gosh, it's a place where we really need the help. It's a place where there are fewer resources. The problems are just as important. People are overwhelmed. It's just a place where having a really good data assistant could make a big difference in a little bit of time.
I think people who work in government have been asked to do more and more, and their
with
jobs.
Less.
With less, there's fewer people. So the same person who develops a plan, maybe with some help, has to communicate it, has to track how it's going, has to prove that the resources are being spent well now.
Be a communications specialist, all of it. It's a soup to nuts job without a lot of help historically, and so that, to me, that's where AI for good really can make a difference.
You worked in planning, right?
Yeah.
And you were always kind of saying when we were building Sidekick, I want to be an analyst, but I can't be an analyst, and I'm really excited about Sidekick doing that for me.
I think that I completely agree with you. I think that that feeling's pretty familiar for people. I mean, not for you obviously, but for a lot of us, we're data familiar. We know we want to be using it to make better decisions. It's just labor intensive, and a little bit of help goes a long way. And I think it'll make better executives. You'll ask better questions. Staff will be way better. They're going to have access to it all the time. It's just top to bottom, I think it's a game changer for organizational decision making.
I remember an analysis a friend of ours was doing, and he was looking at neurological health, dementia, I think, and he basically got to the step where he just kind of mapped dementia and then did some talking about it. And with Sidekick, we were actually able to push that a step further and look at, is there a connection between traffic noise and dementia? And there is. And is there a connection between income and dementia? And there is. And then we were even able to peel it apart a little bit and say, is it less equitable in communities of color? Even when controlling for traffic noise and income, and it was. And so helping people like that take it one step further, raise that ceiling a little bit, I think is really exciting.
Think how long that would have taken somebody. I mean, it's prohibitive.
Yeah.
But to be able to do it in a couple of hours, all of a sudden, questions like, who's like me out there with this same problem become trivial to find an answer to. That's just, the future's really bright for using real data to solve these really hard Gordian community problems.
Well, and if he would have had to spend a week doing that and not know if he was going to find anything, he couldn't allocate that week to do that analysis.
No, there's no way. There's no way. And I guess related to this, we're hearing a lot in our customer base about trust, obviously with AI, and both excitement and fear. And obviously, rightly, there's real reasons to be suspicious, or at least to be careful, right? That's probably the right way to say it. But I don't know if we're hearing enough about how soon the good parts of this technology can be put in place. We're hearing a lot about the bad. The good is here too. And so baby bathwater, big time, right? And so that's what we can't, over the next couple of months. I mean, literally every day we're hearing, hey, I use Sidekick to find out where in my community I have a need. Who's going to be at risk this summer for climate incidents? That's a question you can just ask Sidekick that we grabbed from a customer the other day. How long would that have taken as an analysis? And that's here now.
Right. Why do the big companies get to use this to advertise to people and manipulate people, and our government leaders can't use it to answer the questions?
It's the idea. It's it's what you and I have been talking about for a long time. That's why we do what we do.
Yep.
So for 7 years, you've been talking about the potential of AI to really change the work that we do, and you've been picking up the breadcrumbs all the way along. And then about a year ago, you were like, let's do it now. And just talk to me a little bit about that evolution and why then and what that means for us now.
So during those 7 years, AI was getting better and better with working with the tabular data we've always had, and was starting to get better at working with language. And so you could always kind of see it as a writing assistant maybe, but it was still a little bit unreliable. all at once, because of the way these models work, if they get better at task A, they get a little bit better at task B too. And there were companies that were making them really good at all tasks by just training them a little bit on another thing. Suddenly they became really reliable at doing what you ask them to do in a task-oriented way, and even starting to orchestrate things. Yeah. And so searching our database, pulling the data out, analyzing it, configuring a visualization, that's a really complex set of tasks. Yeah. But if you have an AI do it, it's going to decompose it and not get distracted by having to do 20 other things after it gets this step done. And so about a year ago, they got really good at doing those steps one at a time. And that's really what Sidekick does now. It searches for geographies in a couple steps. It searches for data in a couple steps. It retrieves that data and it makes a visualization, never getting distracted by how big the whole picture is, focusing on the little pieces. Yeah. And our users don't have to learn those magic words to make that happen. Sidekick knows them.
That's I love that about what we've already seen in our customer base, and one of the favorite things to talk to customers about is like what's coming next. And I know that's something that you have a lot of ideas about, but maybe just like, what's the next 3 months, 6 months look like?
So we've always had users who want to put more of their own data in it and use their data to a greater extent. A lot of times it's hard to describe your data in a way that a computer can use it, but AI can take your natural descriptions of data and the data itself and put those together and really put it to good use. And if there's something missing, it can ask you. We were always having to imagine this giant web form that people would have to fill out about their data, and how would we get the vocabulary right so it was right for them. AI can just do that. Whatever it's missing, it asks you the question. You're like, I don't really understand what you're asking here. It can reframe it and try and know what it knows about you from earlier in the conversation to say it in a way that you'll be able to answer. Or it can just say, maybe this is from the year 2020. I've got data from all these other years. Is it good if we label this as 2020 and move on? That kind of flow is possible now.
One of the things that's really changed based on some of the conversations that we've had for me is, I just think back about all the comprehensive plans that I've even helped write, but that our customers have, strategic plans, all of these kind of guiding principle documents, and how disconnected they are from the operations of an organization and even from the data that helped create them, right? Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, those plans, those PDFs, written once, read never, are really important knowledge management roadmaps. Mm-hmm. And if you can blend that together using the same technology you're describing, like you can connect the strategic to the operational in a way that even a single analyst, an executive, can be interacting with that fundamental knowledge.
Yeah, we've kind of seen that written once, read never pattern shift in our own engineering efforts. We used to really agonize about how much effort to put into writing the specification for features of the documentation for something complete, because you don't know if anybody's ever going to read it. But if AI is reading it, it can, number one, do some of the work for you based on that comprehensive plan in this case. And number two, if somebody comes in and says, I have 15 minutes to understand the part of this comprehensive plan I need to do my job right now, it's really, really capable of doing that.
One question I get from customers all the time now, we show them Sidekick, they're amazed. They see that it's the future instantly. And the very next question is, how do I start getting myself, our organization, ready for this? What are the things that I need to do in order to prepare our data to be useful by Sidekick? And what kind of advice would you have for them?
I would throw fewer things out, because I think you're going to have a lot more help searching through them and categorizing them. I would also start better documenting how you want things to work, what the future could be, or in more explicit language, what the comprehensive plan prescribes, because it might not be, it'll be read more often by AI definitely, and it might not be in context with the meetings and things like that you had. So a little more writing up front will probably result in a lot of actually seeing that implemented.
So if I can summarize that, storing the context for your decisions becomes really important.
Yep.
You've also talked a lot about data for purpose, and I'm just curious if you could say a little bit more about what you mean by that.
Yeah, so in technology, there's usually two kinds of data. There's transactional data, which is just what happened, how it happened. That could be that a tax assessment fee was paid or something, or a ticket was issued and then paid. Those are transactions. You can't really tell what's going on by looking at this giant cloud of what happened. And typically you want to transform that into analytical data. You could transform it into all kinds of analytical data, and you might never make a decision with some of it. With AI, you can start to transform that transactional data into useful analysis data right at the moment you need it and make a decision, tell a story based on that data. So when we say data for purpose, it's taking those transactions and turning them into something that makes a point, tells a story, or helps you make a decision. And AI can do that at runtime dynamically instead of making you maintain this data warehouse or all these analysts who are constantly trying to guess what you might need in the future.
Right. So for our customers, obviously, they're living day to day trying to solve the problems that are right in front of them. And I was just thinking of a conversation I had with a health director last week. She's trying to understand why part of her community is struggling in a way that another part isn't. She's wondering directly, like, what are the connections between things like asthma or heat tolerance or any number of kind of larger health trends that are out there. And she's trying to get in front of them. And she's trying to say, okay, how do we provide food where it's needed? How do we provide places for people to cool off where it's needed? How do we provide homes for the homeless? That's the real world problems here. And for her, she just comes in and says, okay, here's the problem. In the Sidekick world, let me say, in the old world, she'd have to go in, start just guessing at data, start doing research on what other people have done. And that's just to get started. But in the Sidekick world, she can just come in and say, hey, I'm trying to solve this problem. What data do you have? What data do you recommend that I look at?
Right.
How should I think about this problem?
Right.
And for me, that's really where AI for good and AI for purpose, that's where the rubber meets the road. I can just say, here's the direct problem that I've got. How do you help me solve this? And I get from 0 to 80% of the way there in a fraction of the time it took me before.
Yeah. We have a client our most senior analyst was helping, and they have, like any number of communities, a bunch of challenges in front of them, and they were starting to look at income. But they were looking at income data that's about earned income.
Yeah.
And so it started to steer them toward communities that had a lot of actually wealthy retirees in it. And because they were doing data research the old way, where you're like, I think this is what I want to do, this is the data set that I know about that is kind of similar to that question I'm talking about, it led them down this path where if they kept going, they'd invest in very wealthy retirement communities, right? Instead of actually trying to address their mission. And so with Sidekick, they just kind of come in and say, here's what my mission is, here's who I am, here's what I want to accomplish, and can get help on the path to doing that instead of saying, let's look at median household income as the way that we're going to measure this and maybe being led astray. So I think that kind of ties into that data for purpose concept we're talking about, where if you start a little zoomed out and have some AI help to stay zoomed out until you're ready to zoom in, you're going to have a much better project than just picking a data set first and then coming in.
Communities are so complex. There are so many interrelated relationships. The transportation network, the food network, jobs, affordable housing, all of that plays a part in somebody's lived experience. How do you wrap your brain around all those problems simultaneously? That's where I think AI can really make a huge difference. I mean, I was talking to a housing agency just the other day, and they're working with low-income housing tax credits. It's the country's most important weapon against houselessness. And the complexities of the regulation, the interrelations of all of these different variables in their community all play a part in deciding, okay, should I put this 150 units here or over there? How do I even go about making that decision? And the ability of Sidekick to give them all of the contextual data in that moment, it's a game changer for their organization.
Yeah. Well, and they don't get exhausted like they would have pulling that data up. We had somebody come in from a local nonprofit community center that was talking about just health and the number of things they had to worry about for every client that came in to try and get some help with their health. and things like air conditioning, whether they had a fridge, and then the basic demographics.
Yep.
But like their job was never ending,
Yep.
and they didn't have enough time to do
Yep.
all of those
Yep.
things. Now they can, and now, you know, they're not hooked up to the machine
Yep.
to make all of those things happen. They have a partner that's helping turn what they want to do into reality.
Think about all the economic development agencies that are out there, and their staffs of 10, big ones, you know, big shops, and their job is to improve the whole economic situation for a region. Every new employer or every existing employer that they're trying to, everybody's unique. Everybody has unique needs. Everybody's looking for a specific way to solve their particular problem. There's no way to wrap your brain around all those data variables. All of a sudden, you've got a very powerful data assistant with you in that moment. You could say, okay, I'm recruiting a 100-person organization with these kinds of educational needs, with this kind of background, with this kind of training, and get the data in seconds.
People used to have to memorize books and poems to know those
Yeah,
things, right?
right.
Because you wouldn't get to get access to those items very often. You don't have to do that anymore because books are pretty accessible. The same kind of thing is happening with these analytical workflows and these visualization workflows, where very specialized professionals would have to memorize how to search the census or how to search the BLS data sets. Now you can talk in normal human language to a computer that will help you do it.
Yep.
And so you can focus on your job and the way you want to change the world rather than memorizing how the BLS catalog works.
And even remembering, oh my gosh, I need to make this ADA compliant. I want to make it mobile responsive. It's just the layers of everything that you have to think through are overwhelming, and that's where we just have to lower the barrier.
Yep.
Sidekick is so much more than a chatbot. I mean, it is a true data assistant, an agent. Would you just talk a little bit about what that means and how it's different than a lot of the bots, chatbots that exist out there?
So, you know, you described it as an agent, and I think people are going to more and more hear agentic AI, but that's a fancy term for an AI that will keep going on a problem using all the tools at its disposal until it gets a good solution for you. And so a couple things are involved in that. One, that it's going to keep trying multiple things instead of just trying to give you an answer as fast as possible. The original AIs were trained to just make you happy and kind of shut you up as fast as they could. And that's where the hallucination that a lot of people hear about comes in. So you ask kind of a difficult data question of ChatGPT, and it might just say like 15.8. And if it kind of passes the smell test, you'll be done. You'll be like, oh, I guess the answer to that's 15.8. It might have made it up. So the big difference with Sidekick is that it's got all these tools and instructions to search and go get the actual literal data values from our database, tell you what the sourcing is, and tell you how it got it, what that thing is, and if it's a little bit skewed from what you asked, tell you that too. So beyond just showing you that it's searching for geographies, it'll show you the search terms it uses, searching our data catalog, it'll show the search terms it uses, and then retrieving that data, and it'll show you the sources that it actually ends up retrieving from. You can, you know, follow those links and see, oh, this is literally from the BLS, so I can trust this value. We're from the census or from mySidewalk's parcel layer. You know, you can also just have that really good traceability of what happened. We also test it really extensively. And so we test for, you know, the accuracy of the answers, that it understands the workflow well and can get you those answers effectively. And then it's faithfulness to the numbers it gives back. Sidekick's extremely faithful to the real data values that are in our catalog. And so it's not making up numbers to get rid of you. It's really that agent that's trying to get you the best answer possible. And it's also been instructed that if it doesn't know, just say, I don't know, because the one thing worse than not having a number is having a wrong number. And so it's not going to do that to you. But I would say that giving it a robust set of tools and testing are the key things. Those chatbots that are out there right now, they're tested against really general knowledge and reasoning abilities. This is really specifically for governments and their allies to answer the kinds of questions they need to answer with a lot of accuracy and a lot of reliability.
One of the things that I know is one of the things that makes Sidekick special is that it has access to our data library. It's an extremely large curated data asset. I mean, you know really well, it's about 35, 40% stuff that we can find out there and just make it so much simpler for people to use. We can inject the metadata about why it's useful in it. And then the rest of that is stuff that we're able to impute from those data values. We're able to kind of build indices and things that are even more valuable. That capacity has to be just to make sure that we're doing it correctly, to find errors in the open data that we've got. I know I've heard several stories of that in the last couple of months about things that we're finding that we need to improve. That capacity has to only be going up.
Yeah, it is. So we've had a greater diversity of data sets being used since Sidekick launched, because Sidekick can help people find data for purpose, right, within our library, where before a lot of times the most highly used things were in our templates, or they were just good matches for common search terms. Now there's just a lot more broadness in how it's being used. We've been replacing things that are a little out of date to respond to that difference in the types of data that people are using. So in the last few weeks, we've gone and had to make our own versions of out-of-date data sets that aren't being updated anymore. So we've had to exceed kind of the original catalog that we read from in a lot of places. But what you're talking about, when there's not an obvious answer in BLS or Census or some other public database that you can read from, not only is something like ChatGPT going to have to make that one more logical leap, they've got nothing to test that against. And so it might have gotten the leap wrong, it might have gotten the math wrong, it might have done a ton of other things. Unless you have that analyst expertise and that expertise in the data source, you're not going to be able to validate what it said. So we're really trying to scale that to our whole user base, that they've got up-to-date, accurate information that fills in all the gaps that might be in their community. Maybe there's not an apples to apples comparison available, so we made that apples to apples comparison available. Or there's not a projection for next year, that they can guess what's going to change. Or maybe nobody's crosswalked all of the county assessors' offices to know about the built environment. We've done all those things so that all the major questions you'd asked about the health, demographics, built environment, social environment in your community are available to be answered by our database. But yeah, it's growing fast. Years ago, it wasn't even 1 billion data values. Now it's 5 billion. I think it's going to continue growing, maybe doubling each year. We've got great ideas for how we can make it more granular. We'd always worried how people would actually find that more granular data, and now Sidekick kind of solves that. So I think we've been able to be a little more responsive to the data sets you've wanted to add after you talk to customers. We've got other feelers out there for who wants what added, but we haven't slowed down the pace we're adding things, because ultimately it's a really good portal to that data catalog, and so it's more important that we add data to it now than ever.
One of my favorite questions to ask Sidekick is, here's the problem I've got, what data do you recommend that I consider? Give me 5 more of those, give me 10 more of those, give me some that are focused on this topic, give me ones that are focused on equity as an example. And to have it do that's an entirely different search experience.
Right. Well, and you'll see chatbots that can go search for more stuff, but they're going to hit the internet. And so it's going to try and pull those data values or that analysis out of a document somebody else wrote. You really don't know the provenance of it at that point. And it's really built on the Google search index or the Bing search index. So you're not really going to do better than Googling it or Binging it, if that's a verb. Where in our search catalog, we're really trying to go for that use case where you can say anything and at least get some ideas for how our data catalog covers it. So we've talked about how Sidekick is different. You've been demoing it to our customers and seeing some of their use cases reflected back at you. What are the things you're most excited about that you've kind of seen our users use it for already?
Yeah, I think that the really common thing, and this has been their problem for so long, is it's too damn hard to find the right data. It's next to impossible to know exactly what data set can solve your problem at the exact right moment. And that kind of context, that kind of ability to ask, here's my problem, here's why it's the case, here's what I'm up against, what data do you recommend, and to have Sidekick find that saves you literally months of research. But that upfront savings, the data finding, which is the pain point that like almost nobody gets over, that's a fraction of the ROI on actually making the right decision. So we can get you there faster, and if we can get you a better result, I mean, that's why we do what we do.
Can you think of any specific cases where you're excited to get it in customers' hands because you've seen them struggle with this challenge and
Yeah.
you just think they can have a big impact on the community once they're doing this?
One of our best partners is the National League of Cities, and they work with electeds all across the country. Every one of these people is working darn hard to try to make the places that they are from better, and they're up against some real challenges. In particular, we've been working with a cohort of cities who's trying to make homes healthier for their residents. It's a really ambitious but important goal. What's a healthy home? You know, it's a great example of a complicated data problem. Is there lead present at the home? What are the asthma rates? Are they exposed to high levels of noise? Do they have access to public transportation? Is there access to healthy foods? What do the school neighborhoods look like? What does safety look like in the neighborhood? All of that comes together in what makes a healthy home. The ability to work in Sidekick to find those answers, to find the data sets that matter most, takes an elected with no real background training. You know, they know the community exceedingly well. They know how to solve some of these on-the-ground problems. They need the context to help. And Sidekick can let them ask the question, get the data that they need, even find other communities that are in a similar position, share that information with their colleagues at the National League for Cities, and be off to the races.
Yeah. In that kind of example, there's kind of like three bodies of work going on there. They've probably defined formulas and data that they're going to use, and they had their research and analysis team work on it, right? They probably wrote some kind of strategic plan like document to describe the work, and then there's like a living document of how they're actually talking about it and working on it as they take it into the world, and they all kind of diverge, right? And now that's really different with AI to help them, number one, create all of those, you know, bodies of work and knowledge, and number two, integrate them, right?
Yeah, and you know, an elected doesn't have any of that kind of. Typically, they've got a day job, you know, and so that's on top of their profession. They're being asked to understand really complex interrelationships in a community, and so the ability to just really make that simpler, to let them interact with sophisticated technology in a very simple way, is extremely powerful. And then on the city side, you know, it makes you wonder if even the way that cities are organized from a departmental standpoint, is that going to last? I mean, that kind of siloed way to be taking care of problems feels like there's a chance to even reimagine things as big as how should we structure our city going forward, because all of a sudden that decision making, the ability to see how these things are connected, looks really, really different. And I do think, you know, just thinking about what's happened over the last 20 years, you know, there was all the open data portals that everybody was really excited about. Not a lot comes out of them, right? It's good to be transparent. Like it's a good thing to be. But what do we get aside from more FOIA requests, you know, and a lot of open data portals? To me, now we're into like, okay, we can actually use this stuff now. And that can be fuel. All of that data can be fuel for making much better decisions, and to be doing it without requiring large data science teams in a city. You know, small data teams that could help work across departments can be really powerful.
Right. That transparency is necessary to use that data for a purpose, but it's not sufficient.
I completely agree with you.
What are the use cases you're most excited about in the next couple of years for AI for good, for Sidekick specifically? Are there areas like, is it housing, is it economics, is it health?
I mean, you could almost go like vertical by vertical, you know, like problem by problem, and be excited about it. Because in every place, there's just been such a deficit of knowledge and of experience, you know, and of the ability to see what's working in one place, and is that applicable to where I am or not? That, like, we've been making decisions based on best practice, and that best practice is very specific to a particular place, and I have no information about the context about why that was made, and all of a sudden that is gone. So I think the thing that I'm most excited about is the idea that you can see something that's working well, you'll be able to understand the context of why it's working well, and you can say, okay, is that a good solution for me or a bad solution for me? Is my context the same as this, or is it different in an important way? That kind of advice does not exist right now. And I think it's going to be, in the next year, you're going to have a lot of that contextual advice. You know, you look at the news every day, and there's some scary stuff in there about where we are with AI right now. We have an election coming, deep fakes, hallucinations, all things that obviously we need to be concerned with. This is an incredibly powerful technology, and we want to be using it to the best of our abilities, just like every other technology. So talk for me a little bit about, I guess some of the risks, and also then what are the ways that we've mitigated that?
So there was a fun story, kind of dystopian fun, a couple weeks ago that Katy Perry's mom saw an AI-generated photo of Katy Perry at a public event and was like, "Oh my God, you look like a parade float. What an awesome photo." And Katy Perry responded, "Mom, that was AI generated. I wasn't there." So it can fool people's moms into thinking that their daughter was at an event. It's pretty easy to see how dangerous that is, that someone with intimate knowledge of you and who can recognize you in a photo can think that you were at a place you weren't, in an outfit you weren't. Just those combinations alone are pretty scary. At the same time, these big companies that have made these models, if they're in social media at least, they're starting to try and label things. But I've seen a bunch of examples of photographers posting screenshots where it's like, my photo got AI labeled, but it was just a photo of the gas station in front of the foothills of this mountain with a cool background, and for some reason it didn't think this was real. So the detection technology is not very good, and I think people will see that pretty soon and just not even pay attention to whether it says it's AI generated or not. So that's dangerous too. There doesn't seem to be a very effective way to counter the misinformation that could come out of AI. What we're trying to do with Sidekick is create good information to counter the misinformation that might happen. We're not going to be focused on photos or doctored videos or robocalls or something like that, but I think we can really do some good by injecting what was the number last year and how did it improve? How many people are suffering from this kind of thing? So many times misinformation is about taking things out of context, and the users of our apps are going to be able to really quickly recontextualize it where they might have been just outnumbered before by the misinformation. Now they can kind of just address things in a few seconds at a time with really well laid out arguments and research behind it. Is it going to fix everything? No, but I think the people we work with need some help to counter that tide of misinformation that's coming in, and I think this is one of the best tools to do it.
Yeah, there really is something magic as well in the ability to use a natural interface to get software, to get data, to do exactly what you want. I mean, that lowering that barrier is such a benefit. And I think that that's sometimes overlooked. I mean, that's a fundamental building block of the generative AI that we're working on. And it's easy to kind of look over at let's make an image of whatever, not at all what we're doing. Needs, especially on the communications front, something that everybody needs to be aware of. But what we're really talking about is just using language to get technology to do what you want. And that element is a key success to Sidekick, and I think what's most promising about lowering the barrier to using data for everybody.
Yeah. I mean, I think good old-fashioned sourcing is going to become really important again in the AI era. And so traditionally, governments have maintained web presences that are a little out of date. And they have some essential information as it comes up. Sidekick could really empower them to put up topical maps and topical charts and write more topical material that is sourced directly on their websites, and that people go, I don't think there'd be any reason for my city to make up this map of homelessness or this map of food insecurity. So I can see how I'd really believe this, where all the photos and videos and robocalls I'm exposed to throughout the day, I don't know if I even need to listen to. So there's a new opportunity to capture people's attention with well-sourced, well-researched information that you can get from Sidekick.
Yeah, I mean, clearly a proactive strategy is going to be better than a reactive one. I mean, this is absolutely a moment, I think, where you want to be not sticking your head in the sand and waiting for everybody to see what happens. I think you want to be out there trying to test things, making sure that you're going through the motions with eyes wide open, but also really trying to get the good stuff that's there already. I mean, paying attention to best practice as it relates to guarding against the bad, but boy, I really do think the communities that are taking a leadership role are going to benefit hugely. I mean, even just, like, I was just thinking about all the grant applications that are, I don't know how many are filled out a year. I don't know how many millions of grant applications are filled out every year. Who's going to win those? You know, I guarantee it's going to be people that are using these tools. So get out front of that. You know.
Yep. Well, and I think that the applications that come in for a grant program can have a big impact on how long that grant's going to last, and if the grant grows or shrinks over time. So higher quality grant applications are just going to make the argument that much better to increase the fund or increase the term that it goes on for. And so that's an area where I think we can have a big impact with our customers.
I love that. And even thinking about tracking the return on investment on that stuff.
Right. So I think the bad's going to happen out of AI. Everybody suspects that. I don't think you have to be too much of a pessimist to see some of the bad things that are going to happen. And so our best bet is to make the best, most optimistic use of it happen too. And that's what we're really trying to do.
I mean, there's a scale, right? And there's, like with every technology, there are going to be weights on both sides of that scale. And we all should be working really hard to make sure that the good is as heavy as it possibly can be.
Yep. What are their concerns with using and adopting AI? You know, they've got their own IT departments, their own legal teams, and this is new to them too. What are their challenges?
I think the newness is the big challenge. And there is some figuring out to do. And how do you even test two softwares against each other in this world? It's a whole different thing. It isn't just does it complete X or Y. It's like, does it do it faithfully? Does it do it? Does it show me the sources? Does it show me inside the black box? Those are problems that everybody's going to have to think through. I think all of those are tiny in comparison to the dangers of kind of blanket bans. And honestly, that's one of the things I'm most worried about for local governments right now is a state legislature or someone just saying, hey, we're not going to do this. And I can understand that kind of knee-jerk reaction, but then you're just saying, I'm not going to get any of the good. I'm only going to be dealing with bad actors, and I think that's a really poor way to be addressing this opportunity.
Yeah, I think the savvier IT professionals I've talked to see blanket bans as like prohibition, that like people are still going to drink, people are still going to use AI, and you're just going to get the worst, least controllable, least regulated version of it if you do that. So with AI, if you blanket ban it, you know, people are going to go find browser plugins or knock off ChatGPTs, start putting the city's data in it, and maybe not have the best privacy guarantees or not get the best answers back out of it. So that seems like a kind of dangerous way to go to me. On the legal side, you know, you want to review these contracts that a vendor is sending you to do an AI project with you or sell you an AI product. And if you blanket ban it, you're not going to get to read the contract. They're just going to click a button that says, yes, I agree to this. So yeah, that does to me seem like one of the most dangerous paths is these blanket bans.
Yeah.
I've kind of seen a lot of larger cities have more capabilities, and they're thinking maybe we can build our own thing. I don't think that's really how AI works. In the end, the frontier labs with their foundation models are going to keep building those. No metro area has any chance at putting together the funding and compute to build a foundation model. And so it's kind of a new procurement paradigm for them, where they're like, we've got this massive IT and even product infrastructure in our city. This is how we get software, we make it, right? And that's not quite how AI is going to work out.
Yep, that's interesting. And I think you're exactly right. I mean, in a lot of ways, those models are going to be like web services, right? And like they're going to exist, but there isn't going to be a city that goes and builds that themselves. I completely agree with you on that.
Then on the flip side, sometimes they'll get locked into $1 million, 3-year, 5-year contracts. That doesn't seem like the right thing to do with this new technology either.
Not now.
Yeah. It seems like you need to do a little exploration, and the price and performance is going to change so much each year that it'd be maybe a little irresponsible to lock yourself into a multi-year contract for millions of dollars. And you know that's not really what Sidekick is designed for. We're a much lighter weight, more easy to review kind of product. So I hope our
Yeah.
customers kind of look for things like that.
Yep. One of the, just changing gears just a little bit, but it is something I've heard a lot from customers. So like you show Sidekick to people and the most common reaction is like, oh my gosh, like this is amazing. Sometimes right after that it's like, oh, what does that mean for my job? And I think we're far enough along with our customers to see it in action. And everybody's coming to the same realization, which is this is an assistant for me. This is going to make me doing my job a lot easier, and I can do a lot more. And there's so much more to be done. I mean, it goes back to that problem of like constantly asking public servants, people in nonprofits to do more with less. I actually think this is a path where we can do more with the same, where you can do a lot more with the same resources. And that, to me, that's a really exciting aspect of Sidekick and where we're headed.
Yeah, I've heard it said a couple times that the people that do best talking to AI are managers, parents, coaches, bureaucrats. You could totally see the partners we have in different governments and different consultants and nonprofits fitting those molds, right? That they've got this massive amount of process that they have to work through. They communicate to the public all the time. They communicate to their teams. They've got a big library of documents and laws they have to adhere to. They're really good at communicating very specifically but naturally about process and having to organize and move around blobs of text to get their job done. This technology is pretty perfect for them. So I don't see government analysts, government communicators, government leaders going away just because we have AI. And I'd actually kind of be very afraid of a future where that was where we were headed. But I'm really optimistic about how this works for them.
I think anytime you can, I love that. I love that, Matt. And anytime you can remove the number of steps between the problem and an answer, you're better for it. So, the folks that know their communities the best, that think about these problems the most, that can describe them the way it's closest to reality even, to give them the resource instead of having, okay, you got to go to this department, you got to go to that department, you got to go do this thing, you got to go do that thing, you got to do this research. To smush that down, all of a sudden, that's a much more powerful workflow.
Yeah. I mean, if you liked what the government did for you before, which not for every citizen and not for every government, right? But in general, I think cities and communities know that they benefit from their governance. You're going to love it when they can do it faster and more effectively, right? So,
I love that idea. I mean, it's why we're doing what we do. We really do think that the nonprofits that are out there, our local governments, they're trying to really make this a better country for all of us. How do we invest in that? And to me, this is a moment where we could see a real shift in the outcome of all of that work.
Yeah. If your nonprofit was funded to have 2 really effective interventions per year previously, and now they can have 6 or 8 because of the reduction in workload and just how much more effective everybody there is, of course it's going to be better funded afterwards. And I think you can see kind of the same logic for a local government, a state government, a department.
Completely agree. I am having more fun working on Sidekick than I've ever had in my professional career. And it's in part because it's really cool. And it's in part because I think it's going to have a profound impact. And man, it's a joy to get to work on that and to get to do that with you and to get to do it with this team. It's so fun.
Yeah. Well, right back at you. I don't think that there's ever been this level of excitement about a new technology while I was working. Before this, there was like going from kind of static web pages to less static web pages. And we had to, as an industry, summon excitement about that, or going from laptops to tablets and phones, and we had to summon excitement for that. This is very different than that. And it's been a good opportunity to pull partners from outside of engineering and technology into it. And you've been great in that process. I kind of also feel like because of what this technology is, it's not as much write down the spec and watch what happens after the engineers, after you slide it under the door and the engineers implement it. There's a little more of all of our personality in here than anything we've made before. And that reflects you, that reflects me, that reflects some of the engineers and data professionals on the team. So it has been really fun.
Yeah, and super proud of the team. Actually, I lied. I'm gonna ask you 3 questions. One of the things that I've seen on our product team, on our development team, is some of what we're trying to build for local governments and for nonprofits and for people who are working in the communities is kind of coming into our own work and our own processes. And I'm seeing people in the organization who we wouldn't have thought of as technical people making significant contributions to the product.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering if you're seeing the same thing and what you think about that.
Yeah, our product managers, our business analysts, our QA now are all using interactive development environments and have access to the AI coding assistant tools. I think this is really an age where really talented generalists who are kind of plucky and will go after things that maybe not everybody would are real rock stars and can get things done that they couldn't have before, that it was just some syntax or some language that would have kept them from participating as fully as they are now, and that's gone. And they're having a lot of fun. One of my favorite coworkers is a product manager here, and she said that she had like a walk planned and was going to call some friends to play online games or something, but instead she messed around with trying to make Sidekick work a little bit better, just because it's that exciting new frontier in what her work can be. And that's I don't know, secondhand exciting to see. There's a lot of pride that goes into the work that we're doing right now, and I think it shows in how Sidekick works.
Talk to me about why we decided to use the OpenAI API.
It performs a little better than most of the others, and it's the best productized. So the frontier labs are all kind of fast following right now, where the performance and the price for performance will track each other pretty quickly. But OpenAI made that agentic workflow that we talked about earlier in the conversation easier, faster, and so that's part of why we went with them. They were also just one of the pioneers in this space. We're seeing the others catch up, and I think we're all going to benefit from some competition in the space. The other thing we use a lot is an open source kind of repo for models called Hugging Face. And so for smaller models that help us search or help us compress things, those get used a lot. And so that's all open source, and it's a place where we give back some, we'll comment and rate things, and if we've ever fine-tuned something on those models, we might contribute that back. But it's a great community. We believe in great communities, and so that's been a place that we're kind of drawn to also.
There's a lot of interest at the federal level in trying to create data that is better for all of us. And there's an RFI out right now about how to improve open data and AI. It's something I know we're going to be submitting for, but I just wonder if you could just rattle off a couple of ways you think at the federal government level they should be thinking about their data assets and how to make them AI ready.
The number one, I think, is to just provide people good ways to evaluate the AI that they build or train on that data. That'd be the number one most important way that they could improve how AI interacts with their data, and leave a lot of other things to the implementers, but giving good tests would really leap them ahead in what they're building out of it. I think the second is to just keep it simple. Like, this could be a time when you look at the whole history of AI and try and integrate all the technologies that were ever mentioned. And I think because the federal government's big, it has a tendency to at least examine ideas like that. I don't think that's going to help the implementers much to put some of the more complicated technologies in. So simple formats, simple text, simple deployment, and provide great tests that people can use to see if their AIs understand, the data from commerce or the data from the census.